In the dark, dank crypt of an ancient Spanish church, there's a statue that weeps. For over 150 years, it sat there silently, watching, waiting, knowing something terrible is about to happen. It all started back in 1861. It was a simple Sunday Mass in the village of Buno when the local priest noticed something peculiar. The statue of Saint Catherine of Bologna was weeping. Now, this wasn't the first time either. In recent months, statues of various saints throughout the country had been seen shedding tears of blood. At first, the priests were ecstatic. Could this be a new miracle? After all, the Catholic Church was experiencing a bit of a slump at the time, and anything to bring more people to Mass was greatly appreciated. So, Father Jose Maria de Allegri told his congregation that Saint Catherine was moved by the piety of the faithful. He even went so far as to claim that he saw her weep with his own eyes. And sure enough, after hearing this, more and more parishioners came forward saying they had witnessed the weeping statues as well. But not everyone was so convinced. Sure, it might have been a miracle, but maybe it was something a little more sinister. As the weeks went on, the number of sightings increased exponentially. Almost every day there was a report of a saint crying out for help in some small town or city. At least 25 statues across Spain were said to have shed tears of blood. People flocked to see these sights, and the churches were packed full every week. Priests stood by, ready to offer prayers and conduct ceremonies. Everything seemed fine on the surface, but behind closed doors, the church hierarchy was panicking. These weren't just any statues, they were extremely valuable relics of the faith, each representing centuries of tradition and dogma. And what if it turned out that they were cursed, or worse, possessed? The church couldn't risk its reputation, so they decided to investigate. A team of doctors was brought in to examine the statues. Though they couldn't find anything wrong. Each statue was covered in fine garments and expensive jewelry, making it difficult to get close enough to inspect them properly. But the priest's insistence that the statues were, in fact, crying fresh blood was enough to convince the skeptics. But then things took a turn for the worst. The first death occurred in Seville. A young woman named Antonia Maria de los Dolores had gone to see the weeping statue of the Immaculate Conception. After touching the statue, she experienced strange symptoms. She began bleeding from the nose and mouth. Within days, she was dead. At first, it was easy to dismiss her death as a tragic coincidence, but then it happened again. A man named Diego Benitez traveled to Madrid to witness the bleeding statue of Saint Francis Xavier. Afterwards, he too fell violently ill and died soon after. With each death, hysteria spread like wildfire. Parishioners who had come to gawk at the supposed miracles were now afraid to touch the statues. Even the priests were too afraid to go near them. The Vatican was quickly losing control of the situation, and drastic measures needed to be taken. The Pope reached out to the Bishop of Valencia and ordered that all mention of the weeping statues be banned. Any priest caught talking about them was to be immediately silenced. To make matters worse, these orders were leaked to the press, resulting in the entire country being thrown into chaos. Now frightened that they would be punished for witnessing a miracle, thousands of Spaniards went to see the statues for themselves. They wanted proof, tangible evidence of the divine, and they got their wish. Not long after, more people fell mysteriously ill and died. Some even claimed that before their deaths, they could hear the statues whispering their names, calling them closer. The Church was losing the battle against these strange occurrences. People were dying left and right, and they couldn't do anything to stop it. Eventually, they made the decision to remove the statues from public view. They sent most of them to a monastery in Montserrat, where they would be locked away forever. But the statue of Saint Catherine of Bologna was sent to an unknown location. Records show that the statue was put on a ship bound for France, but it was never delivered. One account simply says unaccounted for. And so that's how the world learned about the weeping statues of 1861. Quickly, this strange event became nothing more than a rumor. Historians dismissed it as a hoax, while religious leaders tried to snuff out any remaining whispers of the tragedy. For years, nobody knew what really happened in those churches all those years ago. Did the statues weep real blood, or were they merely clever fakes? Was it a miracle or a curse? Were the deaths murders or accidents? And what happened to the lost statue? Well, the answers are probably best left unknown. For today, we know that at least 14 people died as a result of coming into contact with the weeping statues. Doctors examined the victims and performed autopsies, but they couldn't find anything wrong. Every victim seemed healthy until their final moments, when they began to bleed and eventually died. Some say that the reason the doctors couldn't find anything wrong with the victims is because they didn't look hard enough. After all, they were dealing with a miracle here. But others say that there was something else at play, something dark and evil. According to legend, the statues weren't just weeping blood, they were cursing those who dared to touch them. Each statue was possessed by a demon that transferred to the victim after contact. This is why they experienced strange symptoms and eventually died. The statue would then choose a new host, and the cycle would repeat itself over and over again. There are even rumors that the statue, which is still out there, preys on unsuspecting tourists who visit Spain every year. That's why it's so important to be careful. If you see a saint's statue crying blood, don't be fooled by its beauty. It isn't a miracle. It's a warning. This story has remained shrouded in mystery for centuries. There are conflicting reports about how many statues were affected, where exactly they were located, and how many people died as a result. What we do know is that the Catholic Church did everything it could to cover up the truth. Sure, there were some deaths, but there were also some strange occurrences that science can't explain. You decide what you want to believe. Before we wrap things up, I want to share a few theories with you. First, let's talk about the victims. Some say that they didn't die from touching the statues, but rather from something else entirely. Maybe they were poisoned or cursed by someone who wanted to make a quick confession. After all, every victim seemed healthy until their final moments. They didn't die slowly from illness, but suddenly and unexpectedly. This could have been caused by a poison that was administered shortly before their deaths. Second, let's talk about the doctors. Why couldn't they find anything wrong with the victims? Maybe they weren't looking hard enough. After all, this was a miracle they were dealing with, not a murder investigation. Maybe they didn't want to believe that something supernatural was happening, so they dismissed it as a case of mass hysteria. Third, let's talk about the church. Why did it try so hard to cover up the truth? Maybe it wasn't because it was ashamed of what had happened, but rather because it didn't want people to know that the statues were fake. After all, if these statues were real relics, wouldn't it make sense that they were weeping blood? Could this have been a way for the church to get back at those who had doubted its teachings? Finally, let's talk about the lost statue. Where is it now? Is it still out there preying on unsuspecting tourists? Maybe it was destroyed along with the other statues. Or maybe it's hidden away somewhere waiting for the right moment to strike again. What do you think happened in 1861? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to learn more about similar cases, I've included a link to a playlist of creepy statue mysteries. Just click here and I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.